Hi, welcome to Midwest Magic Cleaning. My name is Cornbread Lovehog, and today I'm going to do things a little bit different. I'm not going to tell you this guy's story. I will tell you that he did have some financial hardships, and he had some major problems that came out of the blue with his car that cost him a ton of money, and so he was not sitting well financially. However, the rest of his story I'm going to keep private because it involves personal issues and whatnot. I will tell you he's got a 500-pound rubber band ball in his living room, and it's big enough to where if I sat on it, it's as tall as like a chair. Like my legs would comfortably fit on the floor. It's pretty crazy and pretty awesome, so I took a picture of it. Suck it. The thing we're going to do differently today is I'm going to give you a little bit of tough love, which I have not done yet in any video. I always make sure that we have a positive outlook on places like this because a lot of these people are going through some financial hellscapes as well as bad mental issues and circumstances that are beyond their control. So I always make sure that I explain the mental illness that goes along with these places, and I make sure that we have some semblance of empathy for the people who are living in these conditions. However, regardless of your level of depression, regardless of the level of mental illness that you may be going through, sometimes it just ends up being a case where you have to get up and say, my depression does not own me. You have to look it dead in the eyes and get up and say, I am doing something today. And step one to that is something that may sound a little bit weird. It's opening some windows. If it's cool enough, open them entirely. But at a bare minimum, open up your curtains and get as much natural light in that room as humanly possible, because there is an instant mood change that happens with a room lighting up with natural sunlight. It is not a cure for depression. I'm not claiming that at all. What I'm telling you is that you can go into a room that is dark and dimly lit and feel one way, and then open up the curtains and allow natural light to come in and almost instantly feel another way. It's the same exact thing as playing depressing music versus playing fast, upbeat, fun music. It just changes your mood. There's a psychology behind that you don't even need to understand, but you just need to know that it exists. By the way, this thing I'm pouring out of this bowl and into this jar is just cooking oil and grease. I'm just getting it out of the bowl, putting it into a jar that was going to go into the trash anyway, closing it up and then throwing it in the trash. Then we're just going to run pure hot water in that bowl to melt off the rest of the grease. So what we're going to do is we're going to get up and we're going to say, this stove has gone unattended for too long. And so regardless of how I feel, I'm going to get up off of my butt. I'm going to take the burners off and I'm going to soak this down with oven cleaner. And I'm going to do something about this. If I don't do anything else in the whole kitchen, this stove is getting done today. Now, what I'd suggest is you look at a whole room and say, at a bare minimum, I want this kitchen clean. And that's what we're doing here. So while the oven cleaner is sitting on this stove, I'm going to clear out the sinks and clean the sink so that it can be a safe, clean surface in order to do the dishes. So we're not doing dishes in a dirty sink. Otherwise, it's kind of pointless. So I want to take all the dishes out of the sink and rinse off what I can. And then I'm going to spray that down with Mr. Clean. And that's just to get the main film off. And that's oil, grease, and dirt. Mr. Clean is really good at getting grime off. If you don't have Mr. Clean, just use straight dish soap. It'll do the same thing. It's just, in my experience, not quite as powerful as Mr. Clean. Mr. Clean just does it quicker. But either one will work. Then I'm going to use a scouring pad in order to cut through that grease and grime quickly. And the whole time that I'm doing this, I'm yelling out to the sink, "Do you like that? Do you like it when I scrubs your sink body?" And it's like, I loves it when you scrub my sink body. Thank you, Cornbread. Now, after I'm done with the Mr. Clean, I'm going to use Barkeeper's Friend to finish off the sink. The main difference between Barkeeper's Friend and the cleaners are Mr. Clean actually cleans off the dirt. Barkeeper's Friend is more like a polish, and that's how we're going to get the sink to look way newer than it looks right now. It's going to shine up the stainless steel. And all you do is sprinkle it on there and then make a paste out of it with just a tiny bit of water. And then I use the scouring pad to scour the whole sink and make sure I'm putting a lot of pressure on that. Now I have to be careful about how much pressure I put onto it because my arms are so gigantic that I could push that sink all the way through that counter and through the floor. Because that's how I roll, son. I can't help but be as big as I am. It's just what I was given as a gift. But with great power comes great responsibility. So I have to pull back a little bit so that I don't basically choke slam this sink. Once I'm done, I'm going to take the sponge side of the sponge, not the scouring side, and really soak that down with water. And I'm going to use that as a rinsing mechanism because as you can see on the top right, there's no sprayer on this sink. But don't worry if you don't get it all because we're going to actually add one more step to this in order to get it as clean and sanitized as possible. Once I'm done with this part, I rinse down all of the powder that I can. Then I'm going to spray the whole thing with APC. For new users, that stands for All-Purpose Cleaner. And I make that by filling a bottle 3/4 of the way full of isopropyl alcohol. I use 91% because we're going to fill the remaining part of the bottle with water, and that dilutes that 91% down to about 70%. The reason that that's important is because that's the strength you need in order to kill germs. That sanitizes the sink. You just let it be in contact with the sink for at least a few minutes and then wipe it down and all the baddies will be disappeared. So again, if that sounded complex, all you're doing is filling a bottle 3/4 of the way full with 91% isopropyl alcohol, fill the remaining part of the spray bottle with water, and then throw in like a half a teaspoon of Dawn dish soap. That's like 5 or 6 drops. And that's it. Shake it up. You're good to go. You can use that on anything that's shiny. I don't typically use it on wood, but I do use it on windows, mirrors, stovetop counters, sinks, squirrels, demons, and guys named Abernathy. Don't worry, they all deserve it. They'll shine afterwards too. So we're gonna run the dishwater and we're gonna let those soak for just a few. He didn't have a lot of dishes, but I do want to get these done because it's the biggest thing you can do to a kitchen to make it look cleaner. Then while those are soaking, I'm going to bounce over to the bare part of the counter. And you have to pardon this shot because there wasn't a lot of room to work with. I'm just going to clean the counter and the small appliances with Mr. Clean's Clean Freak. Then I just use a microfiber rag to wipe those down. It gets rid of all the grease and all the oil and makes it look like brand new. That spot on the counter is actually a chipped piece of counter. It wasn't dirt, so suck it. Now on this little folding table that he's got here, which is kind of a staple of bachelor life, you have to have one of those if you're a bachelor. I'm just going to take everything off of here, including the microwave and coffee maker, and I'm going to wipe down the table with Mr. Clean twice because it was pretty grimy. Then I'm going to start putting things back on it. And I kind of call that the move out, move in method of cleaning on a smaller scale. If I were doing a move out, move in the kitchen, what I do is take everything out of the kitchen, even the cabinets, the drawers, absolutely everything, as if you were just moving out. I would clean the whole room inside and out, and then as I'm moving things back into the room, those get cleaned as they pass through my hand. That's a very crazy type of deep clean that I call a move out, move in. I'm just doing the same thing on a smaller scale here. I'm doing that to just this table. My first instinct was just to spin kick everything here and get it to fly off of the table on its own because it's just easier. But had I done that, the microwave would have exploded into a million shards, and then I would have had to sweep it all up, and I don't want to have to do the extra work, so I just took it off my hand. Now you can see how grimy this microwave is too, and that's where Mr. Clean is really good. And I'm even using it on the inside of the microwave, which drives some people nuts, but I'm doing it because it's easy. You don't have to worry about the chemical smell or like a chemical type taste in there because I'm going to add an extra step to get rid of that. This just helps me clean out the inside much, much faster. I don't like doing the thing where you put in water or a wet rag and then run the microwave for like a minute or two. It's like a waste of energy, and it doesn't make it any easier to clean than what I'm doing. So the way I get rid of the last of the chemical smell is I use my homemade APC, and that alcohol-based APC gets rid of the chemical smell, and the alcohol evaporates off, and it's just like a brand new microwave when you're done. I'm going to do the same thing to the coffee maker. I didn't take it apart and clean it because, quite frankly, I just forgot to take that little coffee filter part off. But I did wash the coffee pot itself in with the rest of the dishes. I spanked it clean, turned that upside down and spanked its coffee butt. Coffee oil just shot right off of it. I didn't even need soap. I was like, "You're a bad coffee." Oh, hey, look, more dishes. So we're going to just knock these out really quick. And again, we're still letting the stove soak with oven cleaner. Now, big important note, this stove would have been cleaned much, much easier if we could have covered that with saran wrap and let that oven cleaner sit overnight so that it didn't evaporate. However, we didn't have overnight. We had like 4 hours. So what I did was let the oven cleaner sit on the stove for a minimum of 1 hour. I think it's set closer to 2. And then we're going to clean it off and use a razor scraper to get the chunks off, but I'll show you that here in a bit. It was difficult, but when you don't have that much time, you have to resort to more extreme methods to clean stuff like that. In the meantime, I'm just picking up everything off the floor so that I can sweep just this one area because I needed that floor space for storage for some of his bigger stuff that can't fit in cabinets, like the crock pot and the giant kettle looking pot. These floors never look dirty until you sweep them. And then you're like, oh, okay, that's where all the dirt was. Now, if I were showing you the professional method to do this, it would work, but most people don't know how to do it safely. Instead of using a broom, most professionals like me, I would go in there and just take off my shirt and flex, and all the dirt would just shoot out of the room like a dirt geyser. It would just, I'd flex and it would go thunk, and then shoot into the other room. But most people are used to the broom method, which is why I'm using it in this room. Oh, hey, look, more dishes. I run into places all the time that have roach problems, or more often than not, they used to have roach problems, and then you find a bunch of roach bodies there. If you're having trouble with roaches, the number one thing I can tell you to do to help combat them is do your dishes. Wipe down the counters, because even just a little bit of spilled ketchup or crumbs, that's enough to sustain a cockroach colony. Like open-faced trash without a lid on it, all those things contribute to roach infestations. So get up and clean your kitchen. Clean the stove. Just the stuff you can see on the stove right now, that's enough to support roaches. It's a food source for them. So do your dishes, clean your stove, wipe down your cabinets, and make sure there's no sticky stuff on the floor. If you can keep that maintained, you will prevent a problem before it becomes a problem. I would even go as far as to say, if you currently have a roach problem, clean first. Deep clean everything, then call an exterminator. Because what you're doing is the roaches will freak out whenever they don't have food and places to hide under, dirty dishes and things like that. But it makes them more accessible for the exterminator to get to. They're not hiding underneath piles of stuff, I guess is what I'm getting at. But if you cut off their food source and you cut off their places to hide, then your kitchen is not a desirable place for them to be. They'll go find food elsewhere. So anyway, onto this stove. I wiped all the oven cleaner off and then switched to Mr. Clean, and that is to allow that to soak into these really hard burn-on surfaces. And then once those soak in a little bit, I can then take a razor scraper and just do the tedious task of scraping off all the burnt stuff. Now, I took off the burner covers, and these little gas pillars that are on top of here, those also come off. The problem is this had been burnt on for so long that these things are fused to the top of the stove. If I had some tools, I could get them off, but then I run a chance of breaking it. And if it's my stove, no big deal. If I break it, I'll replace it. But I don't want to be sacked with the responsibility of breaking someone else's stove and then having to buy them a new one or pay for the repair or just leave them a useless stovetop. Plus, since this is gas, if I break it, there's always a chance that now they've got a gas leak that they've got to contend with. So anyway, all that rambling means that I did what I could with the stuff that I had, and I didn't take off those little burners. But we got around them. Once I get all that scraped, then I just go back to Mr. Clean again, and I used a scouring pad followed by just an everyday microfiber cloth. When we switch to the front of the stove, I do the same thing. I use Mr. Clean, a scouring pad, and then I switch to a microfiber cloth, and that's all it takes. If you really wanted to go the extra distance, you could follow that up with some APC, let it set for a couple minutes, and then wipe that down. It'll shine it up just a tiny bit better, and it will give it much more of a chance to sanitize those surfaces. Now we can jump over to the floor and give it like a proper sweep, because the first time I sweeped this, it was just spot sweeping just so I could get areas clean enough to where I'm not tracking stuff all over the kitchen. I really like those floors, by the way. I like that color and the thinness of the wood. I'm mopping this with Murphy's oil soap. It's really good for hardwood floors, and these are actually hardwood. They're not just laminate. Once I have that soaked in there, I've got just enough standing cleaner to soften up some of the sticky stuff that was on the floor, so I ended up mopping that 3 times. If you're not aware, we have a members section. For $4.99 a month, you get an extra video and extra posts every Wednesday. Just look for the join button. I'll actually just link the join button in the description to make it easier to find. And then if you haven't subscribed, we have begun our journey to 1 million subscribers. We are at like 175,000 right now, and that happened really fast. So if you could just hit the subscribe button, that would be awesome. Or you could just continue being a devil worshiper that you are and don't subscribe, because that's what devil worshipers do. They don't subscribe to things. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. Members, I'll see you on Wednesday. Everybody else, I'll see you next Saturday. Later.